What's a sign someone been through some shit? Constantly second-guessing acts of kindness. One major sign that someone has been through some serious emotional or psychological struggles is when they hesitate or second-guess any kind of kindness shown to them. It's like they're suspicious of it, worried that it's a trap. This stems from the fear of being used or hurt, as they've probably experienced people who pretended to care, only to exploit them later and leave them feeling discarded. You can see this constant hesitation in their eyes, the worry lurking behind their gratitude, grateful for the smallest kindness. When someone has endured a lot, they often become deeply grateful for the smallest acts of kindness, things that others might overlook as insignificant. Whether it's offering a seat, helping with something minor, or even just showing up when no one else does, it makes a huge impact on them. It's heartbreaking to realize that something so simple can feel like an extraordinary gesture to someone who isn't used to being treated with basic decency. Overjoyed by simple gestures. I once worked with an elderly woman at a theater who had been through so much in her life. She was well past retirement age, but still worked as a prompter to keep herself busy. I would do small things for her, like changing the batteries in her reading light or bringing her a chair. These little gestures meant the world to her, and her happiness from such small acts made my day. It made me realize how deeply meaningful the tiniest displays of care can be for someone who's struggled for so long. Anxious when things are going well. Another telltale sign is when someone becomes anxious or unsettled when life seems to be going well. For someone who's used to chaos, peace feels like a trap. They're always waiting for the next bad thing to happen, unable to enjoy the good because they've learned to associate calm with impending disaster. It's like they're wired to brace for impact, even when things are finally going right. The calm before the storm. It's a terrible feeling, but when someone has been through a lot, they start to feel like any success or happiness is just setting them up for an inevitable downfall. It's like playing a video game, where you know a boss fight is coming when the game suddenly starts giving you extra health kits and ammo. Life feels like that, a buildup before the chaos. Ever notice someone with that 1,000-yard stare, or the way they seem to move in silence like a ghost? The kind of person who's seen some serious shit, and it shows in the way they carry themselves? Drop a comment if you've ever spotted the signs, whether it's a friend, family, or even yourself. Let's talk about the hidden struggles behind those eyes. Who else gets it? Questioning their worth. Do I even deserve this success? It's a question that plagues someone who has been through hardships. Even when good things come their way, they question their worthiness and whether they've truly earned it, or if it's just another setup for disappointment. This mindset robs them of the joy of their achievements and makes it hard to fully embrace any form of success. Always waiting for the other shoe to drop. They are always waiting for the other shoe to drop, especially when things seem to be going too smoothly. It's a constant battle between rationally understanding that things are okay and emotionally preparing for it all to fall apart. Even when there's no logical reason to expect disaster, they carry the weight of past experiences that taught them to be ready for disappointment at any moment. Guarded and distant. You can often spot someone who's been through a lot by how guarded and distant they are. They've built emotional walls to protect themselves, and while you might catch glimpses of their real personality shining through in fleeting moments, they quickly retreat back behind that protective barrier. To others, they might come off as cold or arrogant, but in reality, they're just trying to shield themselves from more pain. Oversharing as a defense mechanism. On the flip side, some people overshare because they feel the need to explain themselves constantly. It's like they think if they provide enough context, people might understand them better, or maybe even stop judging them. But once they've let all that vulnerability out, they often realize how much they've exposed, and it's too late to take it back. It's an awkward, painful loop. Apologizing too much. Someone who's been through a lot often apologizes excessively, sometimes for things they have no control over. It's almost reflexive, as if they've learned to expect blame for everything that goes wrong. It's a habit born out of years of feeling like they're always at fault, and it can be hard to break. Looking older than they are. Lastly, one of the most visible signs is when someone looks older than they should, especially around the eyes. The emotional toll of stress, trauma, and constant worry often manifests physically, and it can be heartbreaking to see how much life has aged someone before their time. It's like they've carried the weight of the world, and it shows in every line etched into their face. Overflowing empathy, a trauma response. Overflowing empathy is one of the most common signs that someone has been through a lot. My wife, for instance, grew up in a very tough situation, and over time, her therapist helped her understand that her extreme empathy isn't just a personality trait, but a defense mechanism. It's her way of constantly assessing her environment, feeling out other people's emotions to determine whether she needs to brace for danger. It's exhausting, mentally draining, and an automatic response to a world that once felt unpredictable and unsafe. Deep empathy is a trauma response, not a superpower. People often think deep empathy is a gift, but in reality, it's a trauma response. It's not some superpower. It's a result of living in survival mode for so long. You're hyper-aware of everything, always sensing the emotions of others before they even express them, and while it can be helpful, it's incredibly draining. Living in a constant state of high alert takes its toll on your mind and body. Constant vigilance, a defense mechanism. A major part of this defense mechanism is being able to identify people just by the sound of their footsteps or their car pulling into the driveway. It's not something you learn voluntarily, it's just your brain's way of keeping you safe. Every noise, every movement feels like a signal to be prepared. It's mentally exhausting, but it becomes second nature after years of conditioning. Never truly happy, the weight of life's hardships. You can often recognize someone who's been through some serious life experiences by their inability to look genuinely happy. It's not that they're always grumpy, but their smiles are so rare because they've been through so much that happiness feels foreign. When you've endured real struggles, it's hard to find a reason to smile anymore, and even when you do, it doesn't reach your eyes. Living in the shadow of pain. People ask me all the time if I'm okay when I'm just walking around lost in thought, and apparently I look pretty down. It's not that I'm constantly sad, but when you've been through a lot, you carry that weight with you, and sometimes it just shows on your face. Even when I'm happy, it seems like I'm always wearing a mask of sadness. The opposite can be true. Interestingly, the opposite can also be true. After enduring a childhood filled with misery, some people learn to drink in happiness as adults. Having lived through so much worse, the little things, like a meal, a quiet moment, or just watching nature, bring immense joy. It's a profound gratitude for the simple, everyday experiences that might go unnoticed by others. Calm in the storm. People who've been through a lot often stay calm when everything else is falling apart. While others around them panic, they remain composed. It's not that they're unaffected. It's just that they've seen so much chaos that they've learned to handle it with an eerie calm. They suffer in silence, internalizing the stress and keeping it together while everything crumbles around them. Crisis is their comfort zone. For some, like myself, calm is what freaks us out the most. I'm excellent in crisis situations, but when life is smooth, I can't help but anticipate the next disaster. It's like my nervous system has been conditioned to expect chaos, and I find myself addicted to dysfunction. Therapy has helped me become aware of it, but it's a hard cycle to break. The loneliest people are the kindest? There's an old saying, the loneliest people are the kindest, the saddest smile the brightest, and the most damaged are the wisest. It rings so true for those who've been through pain. They don't want others to suffer the way they did, so they give, they smile, and they offer wisdom to shield others from the darkness they've known too well. It's a bittersweet form of empathy, overflowing, yes, but born out of deep, often silent wounds. Black and white thinking and zero tolerance. A major sign that someone has been through a lot is when they start seeing the world in black and white terms, losing the ability to appreciate the shades of gray. It's not that they've become rigid or close-minded. It's more like they've experienced so much that they have zero tolerance for nonsense. They no longer have the patience for games, ambiguity, or people who waste their time. They adopt sayings like, "It is what it is," or "Let the chips fall where they may," because they've learned that not everything can be controlled, and life has a way of doing its own thing, whether you like it or not. The 1,000-yard stare. Another clear sign is the 1,000-yard stare, this distant, unfocused look in their eyes that reveals they've seen too much. It's the kind of gaze that's seen pain and suffering but continues moving forward. They don't talk about it, but you can see it in the way they quietly sit alone, comfortable with silence and solitude. Avoidance of social interaction. They may hesitate to go to places where a lot of social interaction is required. It's not that they dislike people, but interacting with others, especially in large groups, feels exhausting. They've likely become more selective about who they spend their time with, choosing quality over quantity when it comes to relationships. Laughing at the dark. People who've been through real shit often develop a dark sense of humor. They'll tell horrifying stories, expecting others to laugh, only to be confused when no one else finds it funny. It's not that they're trying to shock people. They've just normalized trauma to the point where it's become a source of humor. For example, I once heard someone laugh while recounting how their dad hit them with a car over a stolen beer. To them, it was a funny memory, but to everyone else, it was deeply disturbing. A lifetime of strange stories. One guy shared how he carried his mom as she beat her boyfriend with a pillow while screaming the SpongeBob SquarePants theme song. Why? Because she thought the new girlfriend had SpongeBob's body proportions. To him, this was a hilarious story. His co-workers, on the other hand, were absolutely horrified. It's these kinds of moments that reveal how far someone's sense of normal has shifted after everything they've been through. Buffering through the bullshit. One of the most telling signs someone has been through serious shit is when things go wrong, and instead of reacting emotionally, they just buffer. It's like they pause for a moment, staring off with that 1,000-yard look, take a deep breath, and then proceed to deal with the situation, completely emotionless. They've faced so much that their response to stress or chaos has become almost mechanical, as if nothing surprises them anymore. It's not that they don't care, it's that they've learned to compartmentalize their emotions to get through whatever life throws at them. A dark sense of humor is a shield. Another hallmark is their dark sense of humor. When you've faced enough darkness, sometimes the only way to cope is by laughing at it. This humor isn't just about making light of tough situations. It's a defense mechanism, a way to push back the anxiety and fear that constantly looms over them. They laugh at what others find horrifying because it's how they maintain control over their emotions. Trust issues and self-destructive coping mechanisms. Trust issues are also common for people who've been through trauma. They've been let down or hurt so many times that trusting anyone feels like handing over a weapon to someone who might use it against them. Along with that comes self-destructive coping mechanisms, whether it's smoking, drinking, reckless behavior, or anything else that pushes them to the edge. For some, it's about silencing that internal monologue that won't shut up, while for others, it's about feeling something, anything, when they've numbed themselves to keep their emotions in check. Pushing past the pain. These self-destructive behaviors aren't just bad habits. They're ways of trying to push past the pain or regain control over feelings they've buried deep inside. It's not always about addiction. Sometimes, it's about trying to suppress emotions so they can maintain their composure in a world that feels out of control. And yes, on some level, everyone has trauma in their history. It's just a matter of how deeply it affected them and how well they've processed it. Eyes that have seen too much. Finally, one of the most striking signs is the look in their eyes. There's a certain weariness, a depth that reflects the weight of everything they've seen and endured. It's hard to describe, but once you've seen it, you recognize it instantly. The eyes of someone who's lived through too much and is just holding it together the best they can. Moving in silence, the unseen presence. People who've been through a lot often develop the ability to move in silence, literally and metaphorically. They can walk right up to you without making a sound, their presence unnoticed until they're right next to you. It's a skill born out of survival, a way to observe and navigate their surroundings without drawing attention to themselves. It's a form of self-protection, and you'll notice this quiet, almost ninja-like approach to life, whether they're 4 inches in motorcycle boots like one woman's husband, or someone smaller but just as stealthy, over-apologizing and self-blaming. Another sign is when someone constantly over-apologizes, always blaming themselves for things that aren't their fault. This self-depreciation is a product of past trauma, where they've internalized the idea that they're always in the wrong, or that they need to go out of their way to explain themselves just to avoid misunderstandings. It's exhausting for them, as they expend so much energy trying to appear calm and in control, when underneath, they're feeling anxious, hyper-aware, and fearful of being misunderstood or causing trouble. Over-explaining and seeking validation. These individuals tend to over-explain themselves, often going to great lengths to ensure the other person doesn't misinterpret their words or actions. It's a habit born out of fear of being misjudged, mistreated, or hurt again. They've experienced enough misunderstandings and betrayals to know that clarity is their best defense, even if it means explaining things to an unnecessary degree. The toll of constant stress. While some believe that going through tough times makes a person stronger, the truth is that ongoing stress can wear them down over time. It leaves them overly sensitive, nervous, and constantly on edge. They might appear lazy or withdrawn, but really, they're just trying to conserve their energy because they've been in survival mode for so long. The constant stress breaks them down slowly, leaving them more vulnerable to even the smallest disruptions. Over-sexualizing under stress? Another coping mechanism some people develop is over-sexualizing themselves, especially in high-stress situations. It's a form of seeking control, attention, or validation in environments where they otherwise feel powerless. This behavior, like over-apologizing, is another way of dealing with trauma, a way of trying to manage the emotional chaos they've endured for so long. Grateful for the smallest gestures. You'll also notice that people who've been through a lot are deeply grateful for even the smallest acts of kindness. Whether it's offering a simple favor or just being present, they don't take anything for granted. Their gratitude comes from a place of knowing how hard life can be, and they recognize the significance of every small moment of relief or kindness they receive. What doesn't kill you makes you crippled for life. While we often hear the phrase, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger," for many, the reality is that what doesn't kill you can leave you crippled, emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even physically. Surviving trauma doesn't always result in strength. Sometimes it leaves behind scars that make everyday life harder to navigate. It's not about resilience for these people. It's about learning how to live with the lasting impact of everything they've been through. The gaze of experience. Soldier eyes. There's something haunting about soldier eyes, and it's not just soldiers who have them. It's that hardened, weary look where a person's gaze seems to tell you they've seen more than their share of suffering. I've met countless people in my line of work, and I've realized that this look isn't unique to those who fought in wars. It's a universal sign of someone who's been through some real shit. Their eyes carry the weight of the battles they've fought, whether on a literal battlefield or in their personal lives. The shaking hands and self-blame. You can often tell someone has been through a lot when their hands shake at the slightest trigger. Maybe it's a word or a situation that reminds them of something painful. They're easily insulted because they've been wounded deeply in the past, and any hint of rejection or criticism can open those old wounds. They also have this tragic tendency to blame themselves for everything, constantly thinking it's their fault when things go wrong. It's heartbreaking to witness, but it shows just how much emotional damage they've endured. Dissociation and disconnect. Then there's dissociation, shutting down mentally, especially at family functions or social gatherings. You might notice them falling asleep on the couch, not because they're tired, but because it's their way of escaping the overwhelming emotions. They only wake up once everyone is left, avoiding any real connection or interaction. It's not that they don't care, it's that they can't bear to feel exposed or vulnerable in front of others. Giving up on everything. Another sign is when they just don't give a shit anymore. It's not laziness or apathy. It's more of a realization that they've given everything they had, and now it feels like nothing is worth the effort. They've hit a point where they've realized that caring too much only leads to more pain, so they've stopped trying. It's like they've given up mid-sentence, too exhausted to finish their thoughts. 1,000-yard stare, a window to the past. The 1,000-yard stare is one of the most recognizable signs of someone who's been through hell and back. It's a look that stretches beyond the present, seeing things most of us will never understand. There's a story I remember about a man named PVT, John Ashurst, a soldier from World War I. He was shipped from England to Turkey, then Egypt, and finally to the horrors of Flanders. The things he witnessed, men dying of thirst, enduring months of sniper fire, left a permanent mark. When he finally returned home after nearly 4 years of war, he was a stranger to his own family, suffering from severe shell shock. The photo of him in uniform, medals glinting on his chest, shows a young man with the eyes of someone who's lived 100 lifetimes. He had seen too much, and those eyes told the story. Empathy from trauma, a silent struggle. People like this often have an overflowing sense of empathy, not because they've always been kind, but because they felt so much pain that they can't bear the thought of others suffering. It's their defense mechanism, a way to anticipate danger by reading emotions, but it comes at a cost. They're constantly on high alert, never able to truly relax, and this hyper-awareness wears them down over time. Trust issues and self-destructive patterns. With all the emotional weight they carry, trust issues are inevitable. They've been hurt, betrayed, or abandoned too many times to easily let anyone in. As a result, they may engage in self-destructive behavior, whether it's substance abuse, reckless actions, or over-sexualizing themselves under stress, as a way to feel something or to momentarily silence the inner turmoil. It's a coping mechanism, an attempt to control something in a world that feels uncontrollable. The loneliness behind the eyes. One thing's for sure, you can see it in their eyes. There's a certain sadness, a heaviness that lingers there. It's not always obvious at first, but once you recognize it, it's impossible to ignore. Their eyes reflect all the battles they've fought, the losses they've endured, and the weight of carrying those scars silently every single day. They may not say much about their past, but their gaze tells you everything you need to know.